ready for a deep dive into something. I mean, we all do it, but we rarely really think about it.
Okay.
Learning
Right.
how to make it stick. And I don't just mean for students in a classroom,
No.
for anyone.
Yeah.
You shared an excerpt from The Ultimate Guide to Lesson Planning.
Yes.
And while that sounds, eh, maybe teacher-specific at first,
Yeah.
the insights here, I think, are really universal.
Absolutely. This is about less about lesson plans as much as it is about the lesson plan we each have for our own minds, whether we realize it or not.
I love that.
Yeah.
The book starts with this story, and it's one of those stories that'll make anyone who's ever taught anything just cringe a little bit.
Yeah.
It's that last-minute lesson cover,
Oh, yeah.
where the only material that you have is a single handout on, like, the shared drive.
Yeah.
No real plan.
Right.
Just panic in a PDF.
A great example of how planning isn't about the document itself,
Right.
but the thinking it forces us to do beforehand.
Yes.
The book argues this gives us the mental space to actually teach effectively,
Okay.
to react in the moment, because we're not scrambling for what comes next.
You're not, yeah.
Yeah.
You're not like flipping through papers being like, oh, shoot, what was I supposed to do next?
It's like, have you ever used a roadmap versus just winging it on a trip?
Totally, yeah.
With the roadmap, sure, unexpected detours might happen.
Oh, yeah.
But you're not totally lost.
You've got the big picture.
Exactly. And that applies whether you're guiding students or even just trying to learn a new skill yourself.
Yeah.
Einstein said a teacher's role is to foster a longing for knowledge, not just memorization. Good planning helps create that longing.
Okay, so how do we do that?
Yeah.
Like, is there a secret formula to make someone want to learn?
It's less about a formula and more about understanding the conditions that make learning stick.
Okay.
One thing the book emphasizes is the importance of a safe, motivating environment.
Okay.
They even have this image of lurking dragons to represent all the unpredictable student needs that can pop up.
Lurking dragons, that's an image.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
Well, even with the best content planned, a student might be dealing with a personal issue,
Sure.
or struggling with a previous concept, or even just hungry.
Yeah? Right.
These factors, these dragons, can derail even the best laid lesson if we're not attuned to them.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, so we can't just, like, dump information on someone and expect it to stick if there are these other factors at play.
Exactly. And this is where understanding a bit of learning theory can be helpful.
Okay.
The learning theorist Iliris argues there are three core elements.
Okay.
Content, what we teach.
Okay.
Incentive, why they should care.
Okay.
And interaction, how we engage them. The dragons often live in that incentive and interaction space.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
We've all been in presentations where the content was fine,
Right.
but the delivery, yikes.
Yeah.
Like, no incentive to pay attention.
Right.
But going a little bit deeper into how our brains actually learn, the book talks about this idea of schema, right?
Yes. Schemas are like the mental filing cabinets we use to organize information. When we encounter something new, our brains try to find the right file to put it in.
So if I'm learning about the history of coffee, my brain might be trying to file it under drinks or like global trade,
Yeah.
depending on, what aspect of it I'm interested in.
That's it. And here's where it gets really interesting. The book uses an example of two teachers.
Okay.
One teaching history by rote memorization, just throwing facts at students.
Yeah.
Hoping something sticks, even if it's in the wrong file folder.
Right, exactly.
But the other teacher, teaching Shakespeare, created a whole framework for the students, a context for those facts to make sense.
Right.
Suddenly, Shakespeare wasn't just dates and names, but stories about real people and timeless themes.
Like the difference between, I don't know, like memorizing a shopping list
Right.
versus planning a whole dinner party.
Right.
Right. The party menu has context.
Yeah.
Relationships between the dishes.
Yeah.
You're more likely to remember it.
Exactly. And just like we all have different tastes in food, we learn differently too.
Sure.
Howard Gardner, with his multiple intelligences theory, showed that some people are visual learners, others auditory.
Right.
And so on.
So are we saying that every lesson needs to cater to every learning style? Because that sounds impossible.
It's less about catering to every style and more about understanding that one size doesn't fit all.
Okay.
The book uses the analogy of a tree new knowledge is like grafting a new branch.
Yeah.
It needs a strong existing branch to graft onto, or it just withers.
You can't just graft it onto thin air. You need some kind of a foundation of understanding for this new information to take root.
Yes.
Which brings us to, I think, a pretty crucial concept here, and that is Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, or ZPD.
Yes.
This is where things get really interesting.
So the ZPD, it's that sweet spot
Right.
where a learner can't quite grasp something on their own.
Okay.
But with the right guidance,
Uh-huh.
they can reach that next level.
Okay.
It's like that aha moment when a concept clicks,
I see, yeah.
but with a little help.
So it's not about, like, spoon-feeding information. It's more like you're providing the right support at the right time.
Exactly.
Like a good mentor, right?
Right.
You're not doing the work for them,
Right.
but you're giving them the tools to do it themselves.
And
Yeah.
that's where scaffolding comes in.
Okay.
It's a term coined by Jerome Bruner,
Right.
another big name in education theory.
Okay.
Scaffolding is all about providing those tools, that support, tailored to where the learner is in their journey.
Okay. I'm really curious to see how this works in practice.
Right.
Let's go back to our coffee example.
Sure.
How would scaffolding look different for someone who's, like, totally new to coffee's history
Okay.
versus someone who, like, already knows the basics?
So for a beginner,
Okay.
you might start with a timeline of key events, maybe a map showing how coffee spread globally.
Right.
You're providing that initial structure,
Right.
helping them organize those first mental files about coffee.
You're giving them the framework to hook those new facts onto.
Exactly.
But what about someone who's already got that basic coffee knowledge?
Right. That's when you up the ante.
Okay.
Instead of just facts,
Right.
you might ask them to analyze how coffee impacted different cultures,
Okay.
or to compare brewing methods across history.
Right.
You're challenging them to apply their knowledge in more complex ways.
So scaffolding evolves as the learner progresses.
Exactly.
You're raising the bar, you're pushing them to think critically and make connections.
Right, but what happens when we get carried away
Oh,
and overload them with too much information?
yeah,
That's got to be a recipe for disaster, right?
I would think so.
The book talks about the very real danger of cognitive overload.
Right.
Imagine a computer.
Okay.
You can keep inputting data,
Right.
but if the processor can't handle it,
Uh-huh.
the whole system crashes.
Right.
Our brains are similar.
Right. We've all been there.
Oh, yeah.
That feeling of mental exhaustion
Yes.
after trying to absorb too much information at once.
The book uses a great anecdote about some students who seemed totally engaged in a lesson,
Okay.
asking questions,
Okay.
taking notes.
Right.
But their assessments later showed they hadn't actually learned much at all.
Wow.
They were overwhelmed.
So engagement doesn't necessarily equal learning.
Exactly.
How do we avoid that trap?
Right.
How do we make sure information is actually processed and retained,
Right.
not just, like, briefly crammed in?
That's where understanding the different types of cognitive load is crucial.
Okay.
There's intrinsic load, which is the inherent difficulty of the material itself.
Right.
Some things are just naturally more complex.
Okay, like, learning quantum physics is probably going to have a higher intrinsic load than, like, learning how to bake a cake.
Exactly.
Right.
Then there's germane load,
Okay.
which is the good kind of load.
Okay, I like that.
It's the effort your brain puts into making sense of the information,
Yeah.
connecting it to what you already know.
Okay.
That's how deep learning happens.
And then there's extraneous load. That sounds like the one we want to avoid.
You got it.
Yeah.
Extraneous load is anything that distracts from processing the essential information.
Okay.
It could be a noisy environment,
Right.
unclear instructions,
Right.
even just too much detail presented at once.
Okay.
Like those students who seemed engaged but were overloaded,
Right.
they likely experienced high extraneous load,
Go ahead.
obscuring the important points.
Yeah. It's like trying to have a conversation at a loud concert.
Yes.
You might hear the words, but you're not really processing them because there's so much other noise competing for your attention.
That's a great analogy.
Right.
And this is where chunking, another strategy from the book,
Go ahead.
comes in handy.
Okay.
It's like planning a long hike. You wouldn't try to do the whole thing without breaks, would you?
Definitely not. You got to stop, admire the view, maybe have a snack.
Exactly.
Let your body rest and process the experience before moving on.
Exactly. Those breaks are like chunks.
Okay.
We break down complex information into smaller, more digestible pieces,
Right.
giving our brains a chance to process before moving on.
Right.
The book gives examples like mnemonics,
Okay.
or breaking down tasks into steps.
So instead of trying to, like, memorize a whole speech, you
Ah.
focus on, like, one paragraph at a time.
Right.
You're chunking it down.
Exactly.
It makes it less daunting.
Precisely. And here's how it connects back to schemas.
Okay.
Those smaller chunks are easier to integrate into our existing mental frameworks.
Right.
We're not just memorizing isolated facts.
Right.
We're building a coherent understanding.
Okay, that makes sense.
But there's one more crucial piece of the puzzle.
Okay, what's that?
Retrieval practice.
Retrieval practice. Okay.
Okay.
So it's not just about, like, testing what we know. It's about, like, strengthening that knowledge, making those neural connections more robust.
It's like taking a well-worn path
Okay.
versus hacking through a jungle, right?
Right.
The more we revisit information,
Yeah.
the clearer the path becomes. The book highlights how this is crucial for any skill, not just academics.
Okay.
Think learning a new language. You don't just memorize vocab.
Right.
You've got to use it to truly become fluent.
Right. You have to practice. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like the difference between, like, reading about how to ride a bike and actually getting on one.
Exactly.
Right.
And not just any practice,
Okay.
but active retrieval.
Okay.
Instead of passively rereading notes,
Right.
quiz yourself, try explaining the concept to someone else.
Right.
That active recall makes a world of difference.
Oh, you got it. Yeah.
But the book doesn't stop there. It delves into another crucial aspect, and that's checking for understanding.
Because, it's not enough to just, like, deliver the information.
Yes.
We need to make sure it's actually sinking in. But how do we do that effectively?
The book emphasizes the importance of ongoing assessment,
Okay.
not just big tests at the end.
Right.
This can be as simple as
Right.
asking well-crafted questions during a lesson or having students summarize key points in their own words.
Yeah, yeah, because, sometimes what we think we understand and what we actually understand can be two very different things.
That's right.
I was reading about a study
Yeah.
where they presented people with, like, evidence
Yeah.
that completely debunked a belief they held really strongly.
Right.
And instead of changing their minds,
Right.
they doubled down on their original belief.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
It's wild.
That stubbornness we all have sometimes.
Yeah.
Even when faced with contradictory evidence,
Yeah.
it's like our brains prefer to cling to familiar narratives, even if
Yeah.
they're flawed.
Even if they're totally wrong.
Yeah.
So how do we, as learners, or like as people who are teaching in some way,
Right.
overcome that? How do we help ourselves and others be more open to changing our minds when presented with new information?
The book suggests being aware of those ingrained biases.
Okay.
It's about creating a space
Right.
where it's safe to question assumptions,
Okay.
to examine evidence from different angles,
Okay.
to be okay with adjusting our thinking as we learn more.
It's that growth mindset we always hear about.
Exactly.
Right. Understanding that our intelligence isn't fixed.
Yes.
It's something that we can develop
Yes.
through effort
Yeah.
and, learning from our mistakes.
And speaking of learning from mistakes,
Yeah.
the book really stresses the importance of feedback.
Okay.
Not just grades, but specific actionable insights.
Right.
Help us understand where we went wrong and how to improve.
Right. It's like having a GPS
Yes.
for our learning journey. Right. We need those course corrections along the way to make sure that we're headed in the right direction.
Absolutely.
And, just as important as, like, giving feedback is being open to receiving it.
No, absolutely.
Right. That means creating a culture
Yes.
of trust and respect
Yes.
where mistakes are seen as opportunities for growth rather than failures.
100%.
But feedback isn't just for the learner. The book highlights the importance of reflection for the teacher, too.
Right. It's like taking time to review the map
Yeah.
after a long day of travel.
Yeah.
You see where the detours were, which routes worked best, and what you might do differently next time.
Totally. Yeah. I like that a lot. So it's that idea that learning is not a destination, it's a journey.
Exactly.
And the more we understand about how learning happens,
Right.
the more effective we can be, not just in the classroom,
Right.
but in all areas of our lives. This has been incredibly insightful.
They have.
I think we've gone beyond just the, like, what of lesson planning to the why, the, like, fascinating science behind how our brains learn best.
Absolutely.
But now it's your turn, listener.
Yes.
What resonated with you today? What's one idea you can apply to your own learning journey, whether you're a teacher or not? Think about those aha moments you've had as a learner.
Right.
Can you identify the elements that made those insights click? How can you use that knowledge to unlock your full learning potential? We'd love to hear your thoughts, share your takeaways online, and keep the conversation going.